Hi everybody, let's now consider the performance evaluation of oligopoly. Make sure you've watched my last two videos where we cover the theoretical model of oligopoly and how oligopolists will behave given the very important characteristic of interdependence. At the end of my last video we came to the conclusion that we can have either competitive oligopoly or collusive oligopoly. The real world tells us that we can get both given the same characteristics of oligopoly. We said that competitive oligopoly could be based on price, why oligopolists engage in price wars. We also said that oligopolists could compete on non-price factors, whether it's branding, advertising, whether it's quality of their products or standards of their products. But we also said that oligopoly could be collusive, either overt collusion, where firms literally get together and they decide to fix prices or fix quantities, informal agreements, or we can have tacit collusion, informal agreements not to engage in price wars, or simply price leadership, where you have a dominant company in the industry and the smaller firms just decide to follow whatever pricing decisions that that company decides to enact. Let's understand what factors are likely to promote competitive oligopoly and what factors are likely to promote collusive oligopoly. Well, let's go to competitive oligopoly first. If there are lots of firms, i.e. we don't have much of a concentrated oligopoly here, we are more likely to see competitive oligopoly because organising collusion when there are lots of firms is much more difficult. If new market entry is possible, then making huge supernormal profits by colluding together is not very attractive. All that's going to do is to encourage and incentivise new firms to enter the market and to take those supernormal profits away. So if there are low barriers to entry, new market entry is possible, it takes away the key incentives to collude together and make high supernormal profits. If there is one firm with significant cost advantages, it makes it very difficult to organise and to fix a price or to fix the quantity to produce at in collusion. So that promotes competitive oligopoly. If there are homogeneous goods, then firms don't have the price-making power to fix prices. And if there is a saturated market, where you see a lot of price wars, a lot of price competition, and the only way to get ahead of firms is to snatch market share away, is to find a way to snatch market share. That's the kind of incentives that there are in a highly saturated market. You're not going to see collusion, you're going to see fights. The incentive to cheat on collusive agreements is going to be very strong in a saturated market, given the incentives of taking away market share and getting ahead of rivals. So these are all factors that promote competitive oligopoly. What about factors that promote collusive oligopoly? Well, essentially the opposite. So if there are a small number of firms, it's much easier for firms to get together and to organise collusive agreements. If firms have got similar costs, again, very easy to organise and to fix prices and quantities, given that firms have got similar cost conditions and are therefore more likely to agree on prices or quantities. If there are high entry barriers, then the supernormal profits being made when there is collusive oligopoly will not necessarily attract new entry into the market. The high barriers to entry will stop that taking place, which means that the benefits of collusion can last for the long term. If there is ineffective competition policy, then by colluding together you know that you're likely to get away with it. Then the next two factors link to cheating, and how cheating is less likely to take place if these two conditions hold. So if there is consumer loyalty, then if you as a firm decide to cheat on a collusive impact and undercut your rivals on price, it's not going to benefit you necessarily if consumers are loyal to your rival competitors, to your rival firms. And if there is consumer inertia, meaning that consumers are not willing to switch suppliers, maybe because they're lazy and they just don't want to go through the effort, maybe because it's very difficult to switch and there are barriers to switching suppliers. If there is consumer inertia and you as a company cheat on a collusive agreement, there is no guarantee that a flock of consumers will now come to you and buy your products instead, increasing your market share. So these last two factors link to cheating not really being an incentive and therefore favouring collusive oligopoly to last in the long term. If you then have to evaluate competitive or collusive oligopoly, how do you do it? Well, you do it very, very easily. If you've come to the consensus that the oligopoly you've investigated is a competitive oligopoly, then you would evaluate that oligopoly as if you're evaluating a competitive market. So you would go through the pros and cons of competitive market outcomes. So on the one hand, you get the static efficiency benefits, allocative, productive and X efficiency gains, On the other hand, you lose dynamic efficiency is lost. You also lose the economies of scale benefits. So argue it in the same way. Whereas if you're arguing whether collusive oligopoly is good or not, you go down the monopoly road. You'll see here how I've drawn a little diagram. This is the monopoly diagram showing supernormal profit, showing profit maximization, showing all the static inefficiencies. So on the one hand, you'll say, look, monopolies are bad, allocative inefficiency, productive inefficiency, X inefficiency of monopoly as we've shown. Maybe the diseconomies of scale of monopoly as well. But on the other hand, monopolies do give benefits, dynamic efficiency gains, economies of scale benefits too. So your general arguments of monopoly come in here on the one hand, on the other hand, whereas for competitive oligopoly, it's the pros and cons of competitive outcomes. Alright, so when you come to collusion, you go down the monopoly road. If there is tacit or overt collusion, essentially firms are behaving like a monopolist would behave. So go down that road and you will score big, big marks. Hopefully that makes it clear now how to evaluate the performance of an oligopoly. Very much depends on what we see. You now know what those factors are dependent on, and you now know how to evaluate the end results. I'll see you all in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.